All right, let's jump right in. You know the Faroe Islands pretty well by now, so we're going to skip the intro stuff today and dive straight into some current events. We've got a stack of fresh local news, and it's really interesting to see what's happening beyond the election stuff.
Yeah, it's always fascinating, right? Like these small communities can be kind of microcosms of larger trends. What's caught your eye in the headlines today?
Well, Sandoy is kind of a hot topic right now. Several sources are reporting on a potential merger of all the municipalities on the island. KVF even.
Tindandoy, huh? Yeah, there's a lot of potential there. You could streamline the administration, they could have a stronger voice at the national level, maybe even more efficient services, for everyone. But of course, it's not always so simple.
Exactly. KVF actually quotes the new mayors of Sandur and Skopun, and they both seem to be on board with this whole merger idea. But what about the downsides? I mean, we've seen these kind of merger debates get kind of heated in other places.
For sure, for sure. Merging municipalities means you have to deal with local identities and, potential job losses and things like that. It's not just about like drawing lines on a map, it's about people's lives. But Sandoy is interesting because it's already such a small and kind of close-knit community, so it'll be really interesting to see how they deal with these challenges.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of unique challenges and opportunities, we can't ignore what's happening in Vagar. VP.fo had an article about 15 new tourist cottages planned for children. 15? That's a lot.
And then you see that along with the news about Vagar Airport signing deals with Icelandair and Air Greenland.
Yeah.
It really seems like Vagar is getting ready for a lot more tourism.
Yeah, there's a big influx of visitors. Do you think they're ready for that kind of growth? I mean, it's great for the economy, but you had to think about sustainability too.
You're right. It's that classic problem, isn't it? How do you balance economic growth with preserving what makes a place special? Vagar's natural beauty is what draws people there, so it's super important that they manage tourism responsibly. Maybe they can learn from other islands that have faced similar challenges.
Right. Now let's talk about Faroes culture for a minute. VP.fo also highlighted some exciting news. Dead Man Dancing, that Faroes crime novel that was translated into English, won the Patrono Award.
Wow, the Patrona Award. That's huge. It's specifically for Scandinavian crime fiction, so that's a really big deal for a Faroes author.
Yeah, and it's not just any crime novel. It's really rooted in Faroes folklore and mythology, so it gives you a glimpse into kind of the darker side of the islands, literally and figuratively. And there's more. VP.fo also mentioned that Esther, that popular Faroes musician, is going to perform at the OY Voxbot Festival in 2025. And then there's John Hart Mikkelsen, the linguist, who specializes in Faroes. He just got an award in Uppsala, Sweden.
It's incredible, isn't it? It's a small nation, but they're really making a name for themselves globally. Through literature, music, academics, it really shows how vibrant their culture is and their drive to connect with the rest of the world. And it's more than just recognition, It's about connecting with people. When a Faroes book wins a big award, it makes people curious. They start to wonder about the Faroe Islands. What's the culture like? Where even are they? And suddenly this tiny nation is on the map in a whole new way.
Right, it's like each of these cultural achievements is introducing the Faroe Islands to a wider audience. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about the economy. VP.fo had an article about Nordic Aqua, that Faroes salmon farming company. They ran into some trouble in Q3 with geosmin.
Oh, yeah, geosmin. That's a tough one for fish farmers.
Why?
It's a natural compound that can make fish taste kind of earthy or musty, and it's really hard to control.
Definitely. And for a country where salmon farming is such a big industry, those kinds of problems can really have a big impact. It makes you realize how complicated it is to run a business that depends so much on nature.
Absolutely. And it shows why innovation is so important in aquaculture. Scientists are always looking for ways to deal with geosmin, like special filters or changing the fish's diet or even trying to change the bacteria in the water.
It's a good reminder that even a place as remote as the Faroe Islands
Yeah.
is dealing with these really complex issues that affect the whole world. But hey, let's not dwell on the bad news. In the DAFO had some good economic news too. Faroe salaries went up by 6% last year, a total of 12.6 billion DKK.
That's a big increase. It sounds like the Faroes economy is doing pretty well even with these challenges like the geosmin problem.
It is interesting to see how all these different economic factors are connected.
Hmm.
You've got the problems of a natural resource industry like salmon farming, but then you have overall economic growth too. I wonder if those salary increases will be enough to help people if those Sandoy municipal mergers happen and some jobs are lost.
That's a good point. It's like we're seeing a mini version of the global economy playing out on these islands with its ups and downs.
Right. And we can't forget about all the little everyday events that make life in the Faroe Islands so interesting. VB.fo had a story about a fishing boat that ran aground that was saved by the rising tide.
Oh,
What a close call.
yikes. It shows you how powerful nature is, and maybe a little bit of luck, too. The sea can be unpredictable, and anyone who works on it knows that.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of everyday happenings, In.fo reported on a fire in Torshavn. It started in, you guessed it, a trash container.
Wow. Even in a beautiful place like the Faroe Islands, the ordinary and the dramatic can intersect in strange ways.
That's true. And those little things, the fishing boat, the trash can fire, they all add up to the fabric of life in the Faroes.
I agree. It's those small everyday things that remind us that even with all the big news happening in the world, local events still matter a lot. They shape the community, they get people talking, and they remind us that life is full of surprises, both big and small.
We've covered a lot in this deep dive. Potential mergers in Sandoy, more tourism in Vagar Faroes culture, making a global impact, the ups and downs of the economy, and even those little everyday stories.
It's amazing how all these different things start to connect when you look at them through the lens of local news. It's like we're putting together a puzzle and getting a clearer picture of life in the Faroe Islands.
Yeah. And for someone like you who already knows the Faroes so well, I bet it's even more interesting to see those connections.
Oh, definitely. It's like adding new layers of understanding to a place that I'm already fascinated by.
It makes you think about what all of this means for the future. How will the decisions they make today about things like tourism and merging municipalities affect the Faroe Islands down the road?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's something that every community, big or small, has to deal with. How do you balance progress with keeping things the way they are? How do you create opportunities without losing what makes a place unique?
Those are questions that could lead to some pretty lively debates, especially in a close community like the Faroe Islands.
Yeah, it really shows you that even a place that seems so far away from everything is dealing with the same big issues about growth and sustainability and, figuring out who they are as a community.
Exactly. And that's what I find so interesting about looking at local news from places like the Faroe Islands. It reminds us that these global problems are happening everywhere, just in different ways.
And it makes you think about how different people see things. We've been talking about these stories like we already know a lot about the Faroe Islands. But imagine someone who's hearing all this for the first time. It would give them such a cool and complex view of this place that most people don't even know about.
Totally. They'd see a community that's dealing with the same economic pressures and social challenges as any other country, but with a unique Faroes perspective.
It's like we've given them a little peek into the real Faroe Islands, not just the beautiful landscapes and villages, but what it's really like to live there. And hopefully it'll make them want to learn more, to explore more, and maybe even visit the Faroe Islands someday.
I think that's a great place to wrap up this deep dive. What do you think?
I agree. We've definitely uncovered a lot of interesting insights, from municipal mergers to the global economy, Faroes culture to everyday life. It's been a fascinating journey.
So until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep that Faroes spirit of resilience and innovation alive wherever you are.